The galactic Concord Hall of Zariel Prime shimmered like a jewel floating in the deep black of space. It was a structure of silver towers and glowing blue light that reflected off the endless stars. Inside, hundreds of alien races gathered, proud, powerful, and ancient. Every voice, every movement carried importance. And among them stood the newest and smallest delegation, humans. They had arrived from a small blue planet called Earth, just a few decades into their life among the stars. To most in the galaxy, humans were still beginners, clever but reckless, ambitious but untested. Yet humanity's sudden progress had surprised everyone. They had crossed light years faster than expected, built cities on moons, and even refused to be ruled by stronger species. And now, for the first time, the Zariel Empire, one of the most respected civilizations in the galaxy, had invited them to the Great Hall. Among the human representatives stood Ryan, a quiet man with thoughtful eyes. He wasn't a commander or a diplomat. He was an engineer, one of those who built the ships that had carried humanity this far. His clothes were simple, gray with a small Earth insignia on the shoulder. Unlike the others who spoke with pride, Ryan stayed silent, observing the hall's massive beauty, pillars of crystal, floors like flowing mirrors, and banners that shimmered with alien light. It was more than anything he had imagined, but even as he looked around, he could feel the stares, nay, cold, judging, curious. The meeting began with greetings from dozens of races. They praised each other's achievements, celebrated progress, and promised peace. But when it came time for the humans to speak, the hall grew quiet. From the center platform, Princess Nira of Zariel rose to her feet. She was tall and elegant, with pale silver skin that shimmered softly under the lights. Her eyes were violet and sharp like crystal blades. She was the daughter of the Empress and had ruled several colonies on her own. At the age of 30, considered mature and wise by Zariel standards, she was known for her intelligence, confidence, and pride. But she also had a reputation for arrogance. When her gaze turned toward the humans, a faint smile crossed her lips. It wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that measured and judged. "Humans," she said, her voice soft yet commanding, echoing through the hall. "A young race from a small planet. You have come far, though perhaps faster than wisdom allows." Her words sounded polite, but everyone heard the hidden tone. A few aliens chuckled quietly. Ryan's fellow delegate, a woman named Mara, tried to remain calm as she answered politely. "Your Highness, we thank the Zariel Empire for its welcome. Humanity seeks friendship and cooperation," but the princess raised her hand slightly, silencing her. "Friendship?" Nira repeated, her lips curling faintly. "Tell me, human, does your kind even understand what that means among the stars? You fight each other even on your own world, do you not? You destroy your lands and then rebuild them, calling it progress. And yet here you stand asking to be treated as equals?" The hall went silent. Ryan stood behind the others, his hands folded behind his back. He had seen her type before, people who judged others by where they came from, not who they were. But this was more than pride. It was a test. She wanted to see if the humans would lose control, if they would prove her insult true. When no one spoke, Nira continued, tilting her head slightly. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "humans should remain in their little corner of the galaxy, fixing machines and mining rocks. Leave the true governance of the stars to those who understand it." A wave of laughter moved through the alien crowd, soft but cruel. Mara's face turned red. One of the other humans clenched his fists. But before anyone could respond, Ryan stepped forward. The princess turned her sharp eyes toward him. "And who might you be?" Ryan met her gaze. His expression was calm, unreadable. "Ryan, engineer from the colony of Astra." "A worker," she said with amusement. Fitting, he didn't answer. He didn't bow. He didn't defend himself. For a brief moment, the silence stretched between them, heavy, cold, and full of judgment. Then Ryan did something no one expected. He turned, quietly, without anger, and walked away. The room froze. Even the hum of machinery seemed to pause. Princess Nira blinked, confused for a heartbeat. In Zariel culture, no one turned away from a royal without permission. To walk away was a deep insult, an act of defiance. The guards moved slightly, unsure if they should act, but the human didn't look back. His footsteps echoed across the shining floor until he disappeared through the archway at the far end of the hall. No words. No argument. Just silence. The Empress's advisor, standing beside Nira, leaned close and whispered, "Your Highness, that man just walked away from you." "I can see that," she replied quietly, her tone sharp but her expression uncertain. For the first time, Nira wasn't sure what she felt, anger, confusion, or curiosity. She had expected humans to argue, to shout, to beg for respect. Instead, that one man had dismissed her without saying anything. The laughter in the hall had stopped. The air felt strange, heavy with something no one could name. Outside, in the quiet corridor lined with silver walls, Ryan stopped by a wide window that showed the stars. He let out a slow breath. His heart was calm, not proud or bitter. He hadn't walked away to make a scene, only because he had nothing to prove. He remembered his mentor's words from years ago, back when he was still working in the dry dust fields of Astra Colony. "The strong don't always fight, Ryan. Sometimes strength is knowing when silence is enough." He smiled faintly at the memory and continued toward the docking bay, where the human ships were stationed. Back in the hall, the conversation continued, but everyone noticed that the energy had changed. The humans didn't argue anymore. They stayed silent but steady, and strangely, even some aliens began to look at them with new respect. Later that night, as the meeting ended, Nira stood alone by the balcony of her palace chamber. The stars above Zariel Prime burned like distant diamonds. She couldn't stop thinking about that human's calm face. No fear, no anger. Just a quiet certainty. Her aide, a tall alien named Corin, approached her carefully. "Your Highness, the Council considered the human's action disrespectful. Shall we demand an apology from their leaders?" Nira didn't answer right away. She looked out at the endless sky, thinking. "No," she said finally. He gave no insult, he only refused mine. Corin blinked. "Refused your insult, Your Highness?" "Yes." Her voice was softer now. "He walked away from my pride, as if it was beneath him." For the first time in her royal life, Princess Nira felt something she hadn't expected. Not anger, but doubt. Back on the human ship, Rian returned to the engineering bay. His team looked up as he entered. Mara frowned. "Ryan, what were you thinking? Walking away like that? You just turned your back on a royal." He shrugged lightly. "We weren't there to impress them. We were there to listen." "But she insulted humanity," one of the younger engineers said angrily. Ryan gave a small smile. "Then she can keep her words. We'll keep our dignity." The others fell silent. Somehow his calm tone made them feel prouder than any argument could have. Outside the viewport, the Zariel capital glowed like a sea of silver light. Humanity was still small here, a new voice among giants. But that night, every person aboard the Resolute Dawn felt something change. They had not fought. They had not shouted. Yet the galaxy had seen a glimpse of what humans truly were. Quiet, determined, unshaken, and somewhere high above, a princess of Zariel could not sleep, haunted by the memory of a human who had walked away from her without a word, and somehow made her feel smaller than anyone ever had. A week had passed since the meeting in the Galactic Hall, but the moment still echoed across the stars. Every news channel, every communication network in the Zariel Empire discussed the same event, the day a human walked away from a royal princess without saying a single word. Some aliens laughed about it, calling the human foolish. Others were curious. And a few, the wiser ones, quietly said that maybe the human's silence was not weakness, but strength. On Zariel Prime, Princess Nira found herself reading the reports again and again. She didn't know why the incident bothered her. She had been insulted before by political rivals, challenged by generals, and even mocked by nobles. None of it had ever mattered, but this was different. That man, that human, Ryan, had looked at her not with anger, not even fear, but calmness. It was as if her words, her royal title, her power meant nothing to him. And the strangest thing was, it didn't feel like disrespect. It felt like he had looked through her pride, as if she were just another voice in a noisy room. In the royal chamber, Nira stood by the massive window overlooking the glowing city below. Silver towers touched the clouds and airships drifted through golden light. Her aide, Corin, entered quietly, holding a holographic tablet. "Your Highness," he began. "The media from several worlds are still discussing the human who walked away. The council wishes to know your statement. Shall I release one?" Nira turned slightly, her violet eyes thoughtful. "What are they saying now?" Corin hesitated. "They say the human's action has impressed other species. A few smaller empires are calling it a symbol of dignity. Even the Vorn Collective spoke in favor of humanity's composure." "Composure," Nira repeated softly. "Interesting word." Corin nodded. "Yes, Your Highness, it means—" "I know what it means," she interrupted gently, but without anger. She waved her hand and a hologram appeared before her, the scene of that moment recorded from multiple angles. There she was, standing tall, confident, her voice echoing through the hall. And there he was, the quiet human, standing with his hands behind his back, then turning away without a word. The entire hall's reaction played again. Laughter, gasps, confusion. Nira watched it in silence. Then she said softly, "He didn't look at me with hate. He looked at me as if he had already forgiven me." Corin frowned, unsure how to respond. "Your Highness, if you wish, I can prepare an official message of correction. We could say the human's behavior was—" "No," Nira said firmly. "Let it be." That night, she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts wandered to the human species. How could such a young race, barely known in the galaxy, carry such quiet strength? She had studied hundreds of civilizations, and most young species were loud, prideful, desperate to be noticed. But humans, they were different. They grew fast, yes, but they also learned fast. She opened her console and searched the public data about humanity. She saw images of blue oceans, green forests, and vast cities. She read about their wars, their peace treaties, their inventions, and their mistakes. Their history was full of struggle, yet they always rebuilt. And again she remembered that man's calm eyes. Meanwhile, far from Zariel Prime, the human ship Resolute Dawn was traveling through the quiet lanes of deep space. Inside the engineering bay, Ryan was checking the ship's power system. The soft hum of engines filled the air as lights blinked rhythmically. His team was busy but peaceful. "Captain Mara wants to know if we'll reach Luna Station by morning," said his colleague, a young technician named Darrow. "Tell her the reactor's stable," Ryan replied while checking a circuit line. "We'll be on schedule." Darrow nodded but hesitated. "Ryan, that moment with the princess, everyone's still talking about it. Some people say you were brave. Some say you were foolish." Ryan gave a faint smile. "People can say what they want. What matters is what we do next." Darrow sighed. "Still, she's powerful. The Zariel Empire could easily make life hard for us." "Maybe," Ryan said, standing up and cleaning his hands. "But she's also curious now. That's more dangerous. And more useful." Darrow blinked. "Curious?" "Yes." Ryan looked out through the transparent hull at the passing stars. "The proud never like being ignored. Sometimes the best way to make them think is to say nothing at all." At the same time, back on Zariel Prime, a meeting was being held in the Royal Strategy Room. Dozens of advisors and scientists gathered around a large holographic map showing human space. "Your Highness," said one of the generals, "the humans have begun expanding into the border systems near our territory. Some of our trade lords are uneasy. They claim those systems are unclaimed," another official added. "But their speed of growth is surprising. They build colonies faster than most races." Nira listened carefully. "Are they a threat?" "Not yet," said the general. "Their technology is developing but still simpler than ours. However, they are creative. They use what little they have very effectively." Nira leaned back in her chair. "So they are builders." "Yes, Your Highness. Builders. And fast learners." Nira thought for a moment, her fingers touching her chin. Then she said quietly, "Prepare an official visit. I will go to their colony on the border world. I want to see them myself." The council murmured in surprise. Your Highness, is that wise? Wisdom is born from understanding, she replied calmly, and I wish to understand. A few days later, the Zariel flagship Eclipsera arrived at the human colony world Astra, the same colony where Ryan had been born and raised. The planet was small and covered with golden deserts and silver-blue rivers. From orbit, it looked simple yet full of life, a mix of old human design and new alien technology. When Nira's ship entered orbit, the human command center sent a polite but cautious message. Welcome, Princess Nira of Zariel. You may land at Dock 9. Please note that this world is under civilian administration. Nira smiled slightly at the calm tone. No fear, no flattery, just professional courtesy. When she stepped onto the planet's surface, she was surprised. There were no grand palaces or glowing towers like her home. The buildings were simple, built from steel, glass, and stone. But everything worked with perfect precision. Every machine hummed smoothly. Every person moved with purpose. The colony leader, Captain Mara, came forward to greet her with a respectful nod. Welcome to Astra, Your Highness. We're honored by your visit. Nira returned the nod politely. Thank you, I've heard much about this place. And then she saw him. Ryan was standing near a large energy tower, adjusting a stabilizer module. He looked exactly as he had in the hall, calm, focused, and quiet. Nira paused. That man, he was in the council meeting. Mara's expression tightened slightly. Yes, that's Ryan, chief engineer of this colony. Chief engineer? Nira repeated softly. He works with machines then? He builds them, Mara replied, and when needed, he fixes them, including this colony. Nira walked toward him slowly. The workers nearby straightened up, whispering quietly among themselves. Rian turned as she approached. Their eyes met again, calm violet against quiet brown. Princess Nira, he said simply, giving a short nod. Engineer Rian, she replied. I did not expect to meet you here. Nor I, he said. For a long moment, neither spoke. The warm wind of Astra brushed across the open platform. Finally, Nira said, You walked away that day. I did, Ryan answered. Why? Because I had nothing worth saying. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but curiosity. No anger? No pride? Neither, he said. Words cannot change belief. Time can. For a second she was silent. Then, softly, she said, Your silence. It made more noise than any argument could. He smiled faintly. Maybe because silence forces people to listen to themselves. Later that day, as the sun of Astra set in the golden horizon, Nira stood on a balcony overlooking the colony. The humans worked below, not hurriedly, but with a quiet rhythm, building, repairing, improving. No one waited for orders. Everyone seemed to understand their part. Corin approached her. Your Highness, shall we return to the ship? The air here is thick with sand. In a moment, she said softly. She watched Ryan in the distance, helping a young worker fix a generator. His movements were simple but sure, his words kind but few. Corin followed her gaze. That human again, he muttered. Strange one. Yes, Nira said quietly. Strange. But perhaps not strange enough. That night, as stars filled the sky above Astra, Nira finally began to understand something new. Power could build empires. Wealth could shape civilizations. But respect, real respect, could only be earned through humility. And as she looked toward the horizon, where human lights shone like little stars, she whispered softly, Perhaps the galaxy has more to learn from them than we thought. So, the golden sun of Astra rose slowly over the desert plains, covering the colony in warm light. The sky glowed orange and white, and the sound of machines working filled the morning air. The human colony began its daily rhythm, quiet, organized, and strong. Princess Nira stood near the landing platform of her royal ship, watching everything carefully, The colony looked simple, yet every part of it worked smoothly. Humans were everywhere, repairing engines, checking solar panels, carrying supplies, and not one of them looked lazy or afraid. She had expected chaos, but she saw discipline. She had expected pride, but she saw calm teamwork. It made her curious. Her aide Corin came beside her and spoke softly. "Your Highness, the inspection team reports that this planet's technology is not advanced, but it is extremely efficient. Their reactors use less energy than ours. They seem to repair and reuse everything." Nira nodded. "They waste nothing. That explains their progress." Corin tilted his head. "Still, Your Highness, they are a young race. They have not known war with great empires. Their peace is fragile." Nira looked toward the engineering area where Rian was checking the power grid. "Maybe," she said quietly. "Or maybe their peace is stronger because they've earned it the hard way." Later that morning, Ryan received a message. The Colony Council wanted to meet with Princess Nira to discuss trade and research. He wasn't interested in politics, but he was asked to attend as the colony's chief engineer. Inside the council dome, Nira sat across from Captain Mara, Ryan, and a few advisors. The meeting began politely. Nira asked questions about the colony's energy sources, and Mara explained everything clearly. But soon, the conversation shifted to a sensitive topic. "The Zariel Empire," Nira said carefully, "has vast experience in managing planetary systems. If your people accepted guidance, we could help improve your structures and defenses." The human side stayed silent. Rian's calm eyes met hers. "You mean," he said slowly, "we should let your empire control how we build and live?" Nira leaned back slightly. "Not control, engineer, guide. You are still learning how to survive in the wider galaxy. Guidance could save you from many mistakes." Rian's face didn't change. "Thank you, Your Highness. But our mistakes make us stronger. We prefer to learn by living them." Corin frowned. "That is pride speaking, human. It could destroy your people one day." Ryan looked at him. "Maybe. But it also made us reach the stars." The room grew quiet again. Nira studied him carefully. There was no arrogance in his tone, and only quiet confidence. It reminded her of their first meeting, when he had walked away without anger. Finally, she said softly, "You truly believe your people can stand without anyone's help?" Ryan nodded. "We already have." Hours later, Nira and her guards returned to her ship. She should have been angry, but instead she felt something else, respect mixed with confusion. As her ship prepared to leave the planet's orbit, she looked down at the colony one last time. For a moment she wondered what would happen if such determination ever turned against stronger powers. But before she could think further, a loud alarm rang across the ship. "Your Highness!" shouted the pilot. "Something's wrong. Magnetic interference in the upper atmosphere." The ship began to shake violently. Blue lightning flashed across the view screens. The energy levels spiked uncontrollably. "What's happening?" Nira demanded. "Unknown storm activity." "It came out of nowhere!" the navigator shouted. "The systems are unstable, thrusters failing." The ship tilted sharply. Lights flickered, alarms screamed, and the hull trembled as it fell through the sky. "Activate emergency field." Nira ordered, "Not responding." Within seconds, the mighty royal flagship Eclipsera was pulled down by the storm. The last thing Nira saw before impact was a burst of bright sand and the flash of orange fire. When she opened her eyes again, everything was blurry. Smoke filled the cabin and the floor was tilted. Sparks danced from broken panels. She could hear distant voices shouting, "Your Highness, are you all right?" Corin's voice came from nearby. He was bleeding slightly but still standing. "I'm fine," Nira said weakly. She tried to stand, but her leg hurt. "Report." "The ship crashed several kilometers from the colony," Corin said. "Communications are down. We can't contact the fleet. Casualties? Several injured but alive. The humans must have seen our fall when we may need their help." Nira hesitated. The thought of asking humans for rescue made her feel strange. Only days ago she had offered to guide them, yet now she was the one stranded. Still, she knew pride could not heal the wounded. "Send a signal flare," she ordered quietly. A few hours later, a group of human rescue vehicles arrived, fast and efficient. Dust clouds followed them as they stopped near the wreck. Ryan jumped out of the lead vehicle wearing his engineering suit. "Anyone alive?" he shouted through his comm. "Here," Corin replied. Rian and his team moved quickly, helping the injured crew and stabilizing the wounded. When he reached the command cabin, he saw Nira sitting on a broken panel holding her leg. Her royal uniform was torn and her silver hair was covered in dust. He kneeled beside her. "You shouldn't move. The leg's fractured." She looked at him, slightly embarrassed. "I suppose you enjoy seeing me like this." Ryan gave a small smile. "Not really. I don't enjoy seeing anyone hurt." He scanned her leg with a small medical tool and then wrapped it gently with a support band. "You'll be fine in a few days." Nira watched him quietly. He didn't treat her like royalty. He treated her like a person. It felt unusual but strangely comforting. "Thank you," she said softly. "Don't thank me yet," he said, standing up. "We still have to get you out of here before the storm returns." Under Ryan's command, humans and aliens worked side by side. The humans repaired oxygen filters, built temporary shelters, and treated the wounded. They shared food and water without hesitation. Nira watched them from inside a medical tent. She was used to seeing soldiers follow orders, but these humans worked together naturally. No shouting, no confusion. Everyone seemed to understand what to do, as if unity was built into them. Corin sat beside her, still amazed. "They saved us faster than our own rescue fleet could have," he admitted. Nira nodded slowly. "Yes, and they never asked for anything in return." That night, Ryan visited her tent to check on her leg. "You're healing well," he said. "You should rest," she smiled slightly. "You seem to give a lot of orders for someone not in command." He shrugged. "I just do what needs to be done." She looked at him for a moment and then said quietly, "You know, I used to think humans were impulsive, reckless. Now I see I was wrong." Ryan didn't respond right away. He only said, "Maybe we're still all those things, but sometimes being reckless helps us survive." For a moment, they both smiled, not as royal and subject, but as equals. By morning, the storm had passed. The humans had already repaired communication lines and sent a message to Nira's fleet. Within hours, Zariel ships arrived to take the survivors home. Before boarding, Nira turned to Rian. "I owe you my life," she said sincerely. "You don't owe me anything," he replied. "We just helped," she shook her head. "No, Ryan, you did more than help. You showed me what strength really looks like." He didn't answer. He only gave a respectful nod. "Take care, Princess." As she stepped onto her ship, she looked back one last time. The humans were already returning to their work, repairing equipment, moving supplies, laughing quietly. They didn't wait for thanks or praise. Nira realized something then. Power didn't always roar. Sometimes it worked silently, building, fixing, and moving forward. When she returned to Zariel Prime, the Empress herself came to greet her. "You've seen the humans closely now," the Empress said. "What do you think?" Nira smiled faintly. "They are stronger than they appear, not because of weapons or ships, but because they never stop moving, even after the world falls apart." The Empress studied her daughter for a long time. "Then perhaps we should treat them not as students, but as equals." Nira nodded. "Yes, Mother. Equals." And deep inside, she remembered that quiet human who had once walked away from her without a word, and realized that silence had taught her more than any speech ever could. Princess Nira sat alone in her private chamber aboard the Eclipsera. The once bright lights of her flagship felt dim now. The air was heavy, filled with quiet beeps from broken panels and systems still being repaired. The silence of her own ship mocked her. She had come to humiliate the humans, but instead she had returned powerless. The humiliation was not from defeat in battle. There had been no battle. The human Rian had not raised a weapon, not fired a single shot. Yet he had made her feel smaller than she ever had in her life. His calm eyes and silent confidence were like a mirror that reflected her pride. Her ship drifted in orbit above a small, human colony world called Haven 3. Human engineers were outside, repairing the damage that her own crew couldn't fix. She had never imagined that her royal fleet, the pride of the Zariel Empire, would depend on the help of a species she had once called primitive. Inside the engineering bay, Rian stood beside his small team. They worked efficiently, replacing damaged power cells and stabilizing the alien systems. His movements were steady, focused, and humble. He didn't speak unless necessary. "Commander," one of the human engineers said, "the main reactor should be stable in 30 minutes. "Good," Ryan replied softly. Let's finish this fast. No need to make them wait longer than needed. From a distance, Princess Nira watched him through the observation glass. Every motion he made was precise, purposeful. She saw no pride in him, no arrogance. He was simply doing what needed to be done. Her heart was filled with confusion. Why was he helping her? After the insult, after the mockery, after her attempt to intimidate them, why did he not leave her stranded? When the power returned, the Eclipsera hummed to life once more. The screens brightened, the engines came online, and her crew let out sighs of relief. But Princess Nira did not feel relief. She felt small. Hours later, Nira requested to meet Rian in person. He accepted, but his expression remained calm and unreadable when he entered her chamber. Nira stood near the wide window that showed the planet below. "You could have left us out there," she said, her voice low. "You could have made me beg for help." Ryan didn't answer right away. "That's not how we do things," he said finally. "You don't even ask for repayment. You expect nothing. Why?" she asked, her tone mixed with curiosity and frustration. "Because respect isn't something we trade," Ryan said simply. "We give it because it's right, not because it's earned by power or bloodline." Nira turned away, unable to meet his eyes. "You speak of respect, yet I insulted you. Mocked your kind in front of everyone. I showed you no such thing." Ryan looked out the window, his expression steady. "And I walked away, because some lessons are learned in silence." Those words struck her again. They carried more weight than any threat or punishment. Silence. Restraint. She finally began to understand why his quietness had felt so powerful. When the repairs were complete, Ryan and his team prepared to leave. The Eclipsera was ready to return to Zariel space. Before they departed, Ryan sent one last message to Nira. "May your journey home be safe. Remember, strength isn't always loud." She read the message several times before closing the screen. For the first time in her life, she felt ashamed of her arrogance. When the Eclipsera entered Zariel space, news of the incident had already spread. The Galactic Council had heard of how the Zariel Royal Fleet had been disabled in human territory. Rumors filled the channels. Some said the humans used a secret weapon, others said it was sorcery. But the truth was simple. It was intelligence, control, and calmness that had won the day. The Empress of Zariel, Nira's mother, summoned her to the royal chamber. The hall was vast, filled with glowing crystals and ancient banners that represented the Empire's long rule over dozens of worlds. Nira entered, head bowed, her heart heavy. She expected anger. She expected punishment. But the Empress's eyes were not filled with rage. They were filled with disappointment and quiet understanding. "Rise, my daughter," the Empress said softly. "Tell me what happened." Nira explained everything, from her insult to the silent walk-away to the powerless drift and finally the human aid. She told her mother about Ryan's calm words and how he helped without demanding anything. When she finished, the Empress was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "You called them primitive." Nira lowered her head. "Yes, mother." "And yet," the Empress continued, "when your ship was lost, it was they who came to your aid. They showed mercy, patience, and strength beyond measure. Tell me, child, who acted like royalty that day? You or the human?" Nira's eyes filled with quiet shame. "He did," she whispered. The Empress stood and approached her. "Do you see now what arrogance does? It blinds even the wise. Power means nothing if it cannot show kindness. The humans taught you a lesson our empire forgot long ago." Nira nodded. "I understand, mother. I thought strength came from being feared. But it seems true strength comes from being calm even when insulted." The Empress smiled faintly. "Yes, the galaxy is vast and many races think they are above others. But the humans, they remind us that humility can be mightier than pride." In the following days, the Zariel Empire made quiet efforts to rebuild relations with Earth. Officially, the incident was called a miscommunication. But the truth spread through whispers. The tale of the silent human who humbled a royal without a single weapon. Ryan, meanwhile, returned to Earth's base on Haven 3. He continued his work, just as before. To him, it was never about victory. It was about principle. One evening, as he stood watching the twin suns of Haven 3 set over the horizon, one of his crew members approached him. "Sir," she said, "the Zariel Empire sent a message. They want to send a peace envoy next month, led by Princess Nira herself." Ryan looked at the fading light and nodded quietly. Then I guess we'll make sure the welcome hall is clean. The crew member smiled. You're really not angry, are you? Ryan shook his head. Anger builds walls. Calm builds bridges. And humans have enough walls already. Back on Zariel Prime, Princess Nira stood on the balcony of her palace looking up at the stars. For the first time, she didn't see them as her empire's trophies. She saw them as countless worlds filled with people, each carrying their own stories, their own strengths. She thought of Ryan, the man who walked away instead of fighting, who helped instead of harming, who spoke with actions instead of words. Nira whispered softly to the night sky, I hope one day I can show the same strength. Weeks later, she began her journey to Earth as part of the peace envoy. The galaxy watched closely. No one expected an alien royal to visit a world she once mocked. But Nira was no longer the same person who had laughed at humanity. When her ship left Zariel space, she stood in front of the window, eyes filled with determination. I will not walk with pride this time, she said to herself. I will walk with respect. Her guards looked confused but remained silent. Nira smiled faintly. She remembered Ryan's words. Some lessons are learned in silence, and now she carried that silence with honor. When the news of her visit reached Earth, Ryan read it and smiled slightly. He knew that the galaxy was beginning to change, not because of wars or weapons, but because of small acts of understanding. He didn't need medals or fame. The respect between two different worlds was enough, because sometimes humanity's greatest power isn't in its machines or armies, it's in its heart. And somewhere across the stars, a once proud alien royal finally understood that truth. The Earth sky was soft with morning light, pale gold blending into the pale blue of early day. Humanity's capital city spread like a living network below, with towers reaching toward the clouds and green parks breaking the gray of streets and roads. The human delegation had been preparing for the arrival of the Zariel envoy for days. Word of Princess Nira's visit had traveled faster than any communication system could manage. Rumors, excitement, and curiosity filled the halls of government buildings, universities, and engineering facilities. Humanity knew this was not just a diplomatic mission. It was a test, a chance to show the galaxy who they truly were. At the main landing platform, Ryan stood with a calm, composed expression. He had anticipated this moment, but he did not feel nervous. In fact, his thoughts were surprisingly simple. Humans must act with dignity and humility, yet without fear. The sound of the Zariel flagship landing broke the morning quiet. The Eclipsera descended slowly, shining like silver light among the city's towers. People stopped their work to watch the arrival. Children pointed, engineers paused their welding, and news drones hovered silently to capture the moment. When the hatch opened, Princess Nira stepped out. She wore a formal Zariel uniform, elegant but simple, without any adornment meant to intimidate. Her silver hair was neatly tied, and her violet eyes held a calm that had not been there during her first encounter with humans. For a moment, the crowd fell silent. This was not the proud, mocking princess they had read about. This was someone who had learned, someone who had been changed by her own pride and the quiet strength of humanity. Ryan walked forward to meet her. He did not bow, nor did he offer a formal gesture of submission. He simply extended his hand in greeting, a human way of showing respect. Nira paused, and then she smiled softly. She reached out and shook his hand firmly. Engineer Ryan, she said, her voice steady. It's good to see you again, Princess Nira, Ryan replied with a nod. Welcome to Earth. As they walked together through the landing platform, Ryan observed her quietly. She moved with ease, aware of her surroundings, yet without commanding attention. It was subtle, but he could see that she no longer carried the arrogance of her youth. Her experience on Astra, the lessons learned from her crash and dependence on humans, had changed her. Nearby, human officials and scientists gathered. They watched curiously but waited patiently, understanding that this encounter was more than politics. It was the meeting of two species with very different experiences and yet similar ambitions. Nira looked around at the human city, noting the blend of nature and technology. You have built much in a short time, she said softly. Your species adapts quickly. Ryan gave a small smile. We do what we must to survive. And sometimes we do it better together. Nira nodded. I think I have learned that lesson myself. The official meeting took place in a large hall overlooking the ocean. Representatives of both worlds gathered, humans in modest formal wear, aliens in their uniforms. Discussions began with technical collaboration, energy sharing, and exchange of knowledge. But Ryan noticed that the atmosphere was different from any diplomatic meeting he had seen before. There were no displays of force, no threats, no prideful speeches. The focus was on cooperation, understanding, and mutual respect. At one point, Neera paused and addressed the assembly. Her voice carried across the hall clearly, calm and honest. "We have come to Earth not as conquerors, not as teachers, but as guests," she said. "And I speak from experience when I say, humanity's strength is not in weapons or numbers. It is in their courage, their patience, and their dignity, lessons that even the proudest empire can learn from." The hall was silent for a moment. Then humans and aliens alike began to nod in agreement. Rian, standing quietly at the side, felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. This was the first time a princess from the Zariel Empire had acknowledged humanity's true power. Not through force, not through threats, but through character. After the meeting, Neera requested a tour of the human research facilities. Ryan led her through the labs, the energy plants, and the spaceports. She observed quietly, asking questions yet listening more than speaking. At the main research hangar, a small problem arose. A drone meant to demonstrate Earth's new exploration technology malfunctioned. The others panicked slightly, unsure how to handle it in front of the visiting princess. Rian stepped forward, calm as ever. He examined the system, made quick adjustments, and restored the drone within minutes. Neera watched him work, so not the tools, the machines, or the power, but the way he moved, the way he thought, the quiet confidence without arrogance. When the drone lifted successfully and hovered steadily, she smiled. "You have taught me more in these few minutes than my studies have in years," she said softly. Rian shrugged lightly. "We don't think of it as teaching. We just do what is right." "And yet," she said, "that is exactly what makes your people extraordinary." That evening, Earth's sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky turned shades of purple and gold. Neera stood on a balcony overlooking the ocean, watching the waves. Rian joined her quietly, without formalities. "You've changed," he said after a moment, not as an accusation but as an observation. Neera nodded. "Yes, I've learned that strength is not always loud. Sometimes walking away or helping quietly is more powerful than any fleet or weapon." Ryan glanced at her. "And yet you still act with courage. Not many can admit they were wrong and still stand tall." She smiled faintly. "I learned from the best teacher." He raised an eyebrow. "Me?" "Yes," she said, looking at him steadily. "The human who walked away. The one who helped me when I needed it most. You showed me that dignity is stronger than pride." For a moment, silence passed between them. Then she extended her hand not as a princess to a subject, but as one being to another. Rian accepted it. The gesture was simple, yet it spoke volumes. Mutual respect between two species, two worlds, and two individuals who had once been divided by misunderstanding. In the following days, Princess Neera joined Rian in tours of human colonies, research stations, and even the frontier exploration bases. Everywhere she went, she observed the quiet courage of humans, how they faced challenges, how they solved problems, how they respected life and each other. Rian's calm guidance impressed her most. She saw the difference between people who seek power and people who act responsibly. Humanity was still young, still learning, but it was learning fast, and with principles that could shape the galaxy in ways empires could never imagine. Every night, she reflected quietly in her chambers. She realized that her arrogance had been a shield, a way to hide fear of being unprepared or weak. But humans had shown her that true strength came from honesty, humility, and courage. When it came time for the Zariel envoy to depart, a small farewell ceremony was held. Representatives of both species attended. The human leaders expressed their gratitude politely but not excessively. Neera addressed the humans personally. "On behalf of the Zariel Empire, I thank you for your generosity, your patience, and your lessons," she said. "I have learned that respect cannot be demanded. It must be understood, felt, and earned through action, and I have seen that in every human I have met here." The hall erupted in polite applause. Rian, standing at the side, remained quiet, yet the small smile on his face reflected his approval. Nira approached him privately as the crowd dispersed. "Ryan," she said softly, "I wanted to thank you personally." "You've done enough yourself, Princess," he replied calmly. "No," she insisted. "You taught me something I will never forget. I will carry it with me for the rest of my life." For the first time, Princess Nira felt humility not as weakness, but as a quiet power. She realized that humans were more than their technology, more than their colonies, more than their military or ships. They were a force built on determination, ingenuity, and respect, the kind that even the oldest empire could learn from. The Eclipsera lifted from Earth and disappeared into the sky. Princess Nira looked out at the tiny blue planet shrinking below. She had come to test humanity. She had expected to see weakness. Instead, she had seen greatness. And somewhere in the quiet of her ship, she whispered to herself, "Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, humans. I will remember this day always." Ryan, looking toward the stars, smiled faintly. Humanity had not won through pride, nor had they needed to prove anything. They had simply acted with patience, dignity, and quiet courage, and in doing so had changed the mind of a princess, the course of a meeting, and perhaps the galaxy itself. Because sometimes, the loudest victory is the one carried in silence, in honor, and in the courage to do what is right, and sometimes, walking away is the greatest act of strength of all.